What's up, you sweaty nerds and greasy degenerates? We got a little bit of a different one for you today. This will be very similar to the top 5 best characters in Honkai Star Rail format I usually do like once or twice a year, except this will be basically the opposite of that. But to be more descriptive, these characters are characters that fell off. Characters that used to be good or were good on their launch or release and just don't have the juice anymore and fell off so hard it looks like they fell off a building straight into a pitfall. No, Erlen, get off the screen. These are about characters that were at least good at one time. Go get dominated by Asta in a BDSM all-nighter. This isn't about you. Now, just like the top 5 video, before we get going here, I want to know your predictions on who you think are the characters that fell off the hardest, aka the biggest losers in Honkai Star Rail. Put your predictions in the comments. Don't cheat, it's cringe. Now let's get into this. Real quick, if you like this kind of stuff, consider leaving a like and subscribe to the channel. It really does help out, and we're on that push towards 10K, which will be the first milestone for the channel. So let's get this one out of the way real quick, because I know some of you will be thinking about it. We're talking about Jingliu, baby. Yeah, that's right. I've been saying it for a long time now. I've been saying it since before her rerun even came out. This character has some serious issues with their kit. The biggest one, of course, being that if you're in her ultimate state and you just so happen to defeat an enemy right before a new wave changes, a new main wave changes, normally if it wasn't a main wave, you'd be able to activate her ultimate again if you got enough energy to be able to activate it before the next wave comes out. However, if it's a main wave, when you activate her ultimate, it will not let you put her back into her ultimate buffed state. It will force you out of it, and all of your damage just falls off into a giant puddle of dog shit. Unfortunately for Jingliu, this is just how the game works. Every single other character in the game would suffer from the same issue. The only difference is that those other characters aren't hyper-reliant on maintaining that type of a buff state like Jingliu does. So she suffers the most out of any other character from this type of situation, and they're not going to probably change the way the game functionality works in combat just for one single character. Hopefully, if the rumors are true that old characters get buffs, will potentially change things for Jingliu, but I highly doubt that this will change. I have a feeling that it's probably just going to be multiplier like increases or something like that. Probably not a massive in-game change to the entire game's combat system just so that it can cater to one single premium character. I suppose if they wanted to try to fix this for Jingliu, they could maybe make her kit change in a way that it's more of a passive ability that bypasses the wave change system and endgame content, but that is a big change to the kit, and I think the predictions for most people this time, if they ever do buff old characters, is not going to be major kit changes. It's going to be mostly like multiplier increases or something along those lines. So fingers crossed Jingliu can be saved one day, but to be honest, it is a bit unlikely. Now, you do have characters like Sunday in the game now. We have Huo, who's been here a while, and Ting Yun, all characters that can give Jingliu a ton of energy, and this could save it for some people, but to be honest with you, it doesn't save Jingliu for most players, and so unfortunately, she kinda just fell off. Now, this next one is definitely gonna piss some people off for sure, so just keep in mind that just because these characters fell off doesn't mean you can't still potentially use them in endgame content. It just means they're gonna require a ridiculous amount more investment than some of the other better characters that exist in the game. It's just facts, okay? It's still fun to see these cool runs that people are putting together with these old characters that don't have as much value, but that's all it means, is that these characters used to have a ton of value and their value just significantly diminished. Now, who could I be talking about? It's, of course, everybody's favorite emo kid, the guy that listened to My Chemical Romance and wore all black in high school. It's the dude that's been trying to get Jingliu to end of service his booty since like probably hundreds of years ago. We're talking about Blade, baby. Now, unfortunately for Blade, he's a patch 1.2 character. That was a long time ago, and with a game that has power creep like Honkai Star Rail, it's kind of inevitable that he's going to slowly fall off as time goes on. I still consider him to be a relatively underrated character because in certain moments he's able to pop off really, really hard. Every once in a while, a mode comes out when Blade just gets to pop the heck off and show everybody that he's still got the juice some of the time. And that's in part because he's one of the only like traditional damage dealing characters for wind in the game. You have Fei Xiao and you have him. Of course you do have Black Swan, but she's not a traditional damage dealer. She's a DOT character that has backloaded damage, not front-loaded damage like someone like Blade or Fei Xiao would have, for example. And Sampo, unfortunately, again, a DOT character, is just not quite the same thing. unfortunately for Blade, his multipliers just aren't really there compared to the new characters that are coming out in the game. He just doesn't really have the damage output these days. And you have to remember, he came out in patch 1.2, bro. Of course he launched as a great character. Everybody launched as a great character during that time period. There was basically no competition. But if people back then, dude, listen to this, even people back then had the forethought to realize, I don't know if Blade's the right pull right now, because you had characters like Dan Hung and Bibertir Lune coming out shortly after. You had Kafka came out literally right after him during the same patch, and back then DOT was actually really strong, and they were releasing, you know, strong synergy with Kafka, etc., etc. Fu Xuan was a very valued character because back then you didn't have a lot of sustainability characters that even released, bro. Ron May eventually released. Now that's a little bit further out, but you see my point here, right? There was a lot of other better value picks potentially even at his launch. So as time has gone on, despite the fact that Blade has had these cool moments to shine every once in a while, and I do feel like he's kind of an underrated character to some degree, he did massively fall off compared to the value that he had when he originally came out, and that fits the criteria of this list perfectly. Now, I need to say this for all the Blade fans, okay? Despite the fact that Blade has fallen off significantly, I think he's gonna have a Jingliu moment coming up here soon. I'm sure you guys noticed that characters like Mighty has come out as an HP scaling character. You had Tribby come out as an HP scaling character. Casterus, nudge nudge wink wink, looks like she's gonna come out as an HP scaling character, and we're gonna have this strong like HP scaling team come out, and you could basically substitute Mighty in that team for Blade if you wanted to, because Blade is also an HP scaler. So I think he's yet again going to have one of these moments where he comes out and he has a moment to shine in the sunlight for a little while, and I think that's happening pretty darn soon. Now with this next character, I wanted to go with something a little more out of left field. I'm talking about Asta. On launch, this was one of the best characters in the entire game because, as we all know, supports are the best characters, and she was one of the few that existed. And she has team-wide attack buffs, dog. She has team-wide speed buffs, dog. This is basically the formula that eventually made, you guessed it, Robin. Robin said, oh, you have speed? Who needs speed when I'm just going to action advance the entire team? Who needs these puny little attack buffs that require triggers and stuff like that? Robin basically just like gets to throw out those attack buffs for free practically. The conditions are much easier to meet, and they're much more significant, and they're static for basically the entire rest of the fight. So Asta, unfortunate for her, she was literally one of the best characters to use on hyper carry or even dual DPS on launch. She was a fantastic character when the DOT meta popped off. Dude, Asta was the best DOT support when Kafka came out, and she remained the best DOT support until Ron May came out. And just because Ron May existed doesn't mean you couldn't still use Asta, because a lot of people were trying to use Ron May on their other team that wasn't their DOT team, and it was never an issue because you just used Asta in that situation for your DOT team. She remained a valuable character for a significant amount of time. I'd say all the way up until Robin basically released, which Robin basically power crept like every support in the game at the time. So it's inevitable. Unfortunately for Asta, she has fallen off significantly. I don't know if they could even potentially buff her kit in like a minimal way with just multipliers to make her better. Unfortunately, I think Asta's days are numbered. Unless she comes out with a 5-star variant, I think she kind of just fell off. Which I'm sure Arlen is very happy about. Bro has probably felt like a little weenie the entire time. Asta has always been the bigger breadwinner out of the couple, and she also always had more meta relevancy and still does to this day. But having her get brought down more onto his level probably makes him feel a little bit better. Now, Asta's probably still dominating him in the bedroom, but it is what it is. Now, don't worry, I haven't forgot. I've been playing this game since the last week of the first ever banner in Honkai Star Rail. And who was on the first banner of Honkai Star Rail? That's right, we're talking about Seele, who was the best DPS character in the game all the way up until Dan Hung and Bibertir Lune came out. People were waiting for her to get pushed out of that top slot so bad, and I genuinely think it's because people started playing the game after her banner came out, or they started playing when her banner came out, but they just didn't have enough pulls to pull her, and so they were just kind of a little bit jealous and waiting for her to die off, right? Then Jingliu came out, and then DOT was popping off, and yeah, things just haven't been so great for Seele ever since her launch. Now, it's super fun to see people doing these insane clears with Seele, I saw one the other day of the recent Memory of Chaos where Seele was zero cycled. And no, she wasn't some Omega E6 character. It was just somebody with an insanely strong build, with insanely strong teams, and really had a perfect setup for the situation. But it's still cool to see people popping off with these old characters that fell out of meta relevancy. Now, unfortunately for Seele, I think the average Joe is never gonna look at their Seele ever again. The average player has just put her on the bench and never even looks in her general direction. They don't want to make eye contact because they know she's gonna ask, "Is it my turn, coach? Am I gonna get put in today?" Nah, bitch, stay on the bench, dog. Now, I've been thinking this and saying this for a long time about Seele. There is one thing that they could implement into the game that would be so easy to implement, and it would power spike her so hard. If they made her extra turn mechanic count as a follow-up attack, she would instantly become so much more relevant than she used to be. She is a hunt-based character after all, and hunt-based characters ended up turning very quickly into follow-up characters. Remember, she's the first premium hunt character in the game, and she's not a follow-up character. She has an extra turn mechanic instead, but follow-ups usually are, to some extent, slightly randomized to some degree. You don't get to pick the character that the follow-up ends up on all of the time. It's usually on the enemy that you're hitting, and then if that enemy dies, it sort of randomizes to somebody else or defaults to the character with like the highest HP or defense or whatever. That's usually the type of mechanic you'd see with a follow-up style character. But with Seele and her extra turn mechanic, you get to choose the enemy that you attack after with that extra turn. This is part of what made her so strong, because you could synchronize all of these cool little things with her ultimate and her and getting back potentially a skill point, using her basic attack to get the skill point back, and then popping the ult, getting another turn after that. It was so fun. Seele's one of the most fun characters to play in the game, but she just doesn't have the damage output to really benefit off her extra turn anymore. But if they made it count as a follow-up attack, I genuinely think it would mean so much for her in the meta. But it would give her like the most unique follow-up attack in the game, probably. At least that's how I would see it, because you can't normally like actually slow down gameplay and choose the character that you attack with the follow-up. So they may not ever implement this, but I really hope they do. I think it would be so cool. Now, we're on the last character here on the list. However, I will be putting forth a single runner-up and a few honorable mentions. So the last character on the list is going to be Welt. Welt is such a cool character, bro. He is lore-wise like one of the coolest dudes in the whole game, right? And he also was really great in combat. He was jokingly the best sustainability character in the entire game on launch, because we didn't have Ron May at the time. And as you know, being able to slow down enemies or even weakness break enemies and then delay the weakness like Ron May could, the enemies can't hurt you if they're not allowed to attack you, so you can't take damage. And Welt was the first of the like supportive style characters that could do this. Unfortunately for Welt, his multipliers just aren't really there anymore, and if you want him to be a slow enemy generator, he can be considered as a skill point hungry character. A character like Ron May, who slows enemies by when you weakness break them, she delays the break another time. That doesn't require you to have to use skill points to do that. So unfortunately for Welt, he's just kind of fallen off. And in any situation you would want to potentially use him, there's just always a better option. In fact, there's usually a list of other options you could use. Welt was definitely a very fun character on launch, but you're not gonna see a whole lot of Welt solo runs anymore. He just doesn't really have the juice. And power creep, it really affected a character like Welt. That being said, in terms of lore, he's still one of the coolest characters in the game, and you're just not going to be able to convince me otherwise. Fight me about it, I don't care, you're going to lose. Now we're going to speed run through the runner-up as well as the honorable mentions. And for the runner-up, we decided to only go with one character, and this was a little bit of a hard choice. I decided to go with QQ because I was stuck between Asta and QQ for the last spot on the list. But unfortunately for Asta, the DOT meta, which is where she is most used right now, just isn't hitting on all cylinders, bro. It just is not. And when the DOT meta eventually does rise up again, part of what's going to make it rise up again are going to be other characters. So she just keeps falling off even more to some degree. She will have more value when the DOT meta rises up again, but that's not today. And so with QQ, she actually still has some meta relevancy. You could use a lot of these newer supportive characters that are super high powered and really juice up QQ. Sparkle exists, for example, fixing the SP problems that QQ has. It doesn't entirely fix it, which is part of why she fell off, but you see what I'm saying. QQ is still getting used slightly more than Asta, making her more meta relevant. And this list isn't about meta relevancy in terms of their value, it's about how the characters fell off. And unfortunately, Asta is just a character that fell off harder than QQ. So QQ gets the runner-up. Now for the runner-ups, we're just going to list them off here. We have Su Shang, strong character. She was a break character for a while, but then characters like Luca came out and just outshined her. Unfortunately, she just doesn't really have a place in the meta. Yang Qing, otherwise known as Young King out here. Boy, he was, man, he was cool on launch, bro, but he very quickly started falling off harder and harder and harder and harder. And a character like Misha honestly outperforms him right now. That's crazy, bro. That's crazy. And we also have, of course, the 3 sustainability characters from 1.0 in the form of March 7th, Natasha, and the preservation main character. These characters, they were so valuable. They were so valuable on launch because they were all that we really had besides Bailu and Gepard, which were 5-star characters, but these being 4-star characters, except the main character technically counts as a 5-star, but you don't pull them. It's stupid. You get my point here. These are the runner-ups. If there's any runner-ups that did not end up on this list, it just means that they didn't have as big of a fall off as the other ones did, okay? And if there's anybody that didn't end up on the list or on the runner-ups, put them in the comments down below, because there are other characters that fell off, just not as hard as these ones necessarily did. If you like this kind of stuff, consider leaving a like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace out.